Eh, There we go. In Maple Bay. Okay, I think we're going to get started here. Tonight we are presenting Trevor Miller, and I've known Trevor for a long time, and he is a co-founder of Motus Physiotherapy, and we're going to do optimizing recovery strategies on a budget, so how you can save money and help yourself as opposed to having to go in for every niggling little thing, and discover practical tips and techniques for self-care including trigger point therapy, self-massage, and effective stretching methods. So, and he 10 over a decade of experience as a certified strength and conditioning specialist and physiotherapist. So there we go. And by the way, he's also a good runner, but he'll never tell you that. Anyway, first up though, I wanted to introduce Safira, and we've got a new sponsor this year. We've never had a sponsor for a speaker series before, and it's Mars Quest sunglasses, which are very cool. And unfortunately, she hasn't got any to show you, but you can see them on our website, and they're quite different and they're pretty neat. So worth checking out. And we have our own RVM glass special model, which is being produced. So that's going to be a lot of fun too. And we're going to give away 3 pairs at the end of this session. So stay tuned for that. So, Safira, did you want to say anything about the glasses? You probably do.
I definitely do. So the unique thing about Mars Quest is that one, like we pride ourselves on being Canadian made, Canadian manufactured. Uh, the other thing is that they're lighter in weight compared to most other competitive brands, as well as they're brighter because they're polarized and they're unbreakable. Like they've gone through so many different breaking tests and they've been run over cars and everything. And honestly, like the most that will happen is that it'll snap out, like the band will snap out, and you just snap it right back in. And it's very durable, scratch resistant. And if it does happen to break, because wear and tear does happen, we promise that you guys will get like free replacements. You just tell us and we'll ship another one over to you, no questions asked. And as Rod already said, that we're doing a giveaway for the co-branded sunglasses, and I hope you enjoy it. I hope you guys stay till the end for a chance to win.
Great. Well, thanks for checking in. Okay, so we're going to get over to Trevor. And as I mentioned at the top of this, if you have questions, just put them in the Q&A box, and we'll try and get to them as many as we can at the end. And now I'm going to turn it over to Trevor for a little bit of valuable information. So welcome, Trevor.
Thank you, Rod. And before I forget, thank you to the organizing committee for inviting me. I was fortunate enough to do one of these last year as well, or contribute to one at least, and it was great. So I hope I can be of some use to some people here. Thank you for the introduction. I'm basically here to talk myself out of a job, which is only kind of a little bit of a joke. It is kind of what we're trying to get people to do, and you'll see what I mean as we go here. Um, the thing that I take a lot of slack for when I do these things is I usually forget to actually kind of introduce myself and give a little bit of context to maybe why I was invited. So my history, the things that have brought me here in a nutshell, when I first met Rod, I was kind of university age, and I kind of was trying to figure out a way to weasel my way into the world of high performance sport as an athlete. And after a short time, it became apparent that I was never really going to do that and or make a living at it at least. And so I kind of switched gears a bit and I became a strength coach. And so I worked with some in Victoria. We're lucky enough to have a lot of really kind of big and high performance groups. And I got to work with quite a few of those. And then I kind of switched gears again after realizing that all these athletes I was working with as a strength coach were actually injured or previously injured or about to be injured. And so I went back to school and became a physio and again got involved with some high performance groups, including Athletics Canada, which was a really cool thing to be able to do for a while. Good luck to them in the next couple days here coming up in Paris. And then in 2017, as Rod said, I co-founded a physio clinic where we try to just help active people stay active, and that's our kind of our main goal is to just people of all levels of accomplishment and fitness. We just try to help them do what they want to do. So that's me. And with that kind of awkward, let's talk about me out of the way. Um, let's get right into the talk here. And so I've been invited to speak about recovery. And the topic actually wasn't my idea. It was suggested to me by an athlete that I used to work with, who's now involved in the administrative side of things. But we used to do these recovery sessions, and so once a week, all the athletes would meet together, and we would do these things together in a kind of a 1 hour session that would just help to facilitate them rebuilding themselves or returning their bodies to kind of the ready state to beat themselves up again at the next workout. And that's kind of really what we all want to do as athletes, I think, is just be able to prepare ourselves for the next thing. So it's partly training, it's partly recovery, and then we can't I couldn't do this talk without using the word rest. And so rest is the as opposed to recovery, which is kind of an active thing that we'll talk about tonight. Rest is just it's a passive thing. It's doing nothing, but it's really important. And anyone who has a coach or has had a program written for them, or even I'm sure the programs for the marathon all have a little bit of recovery, or excuse me, rest built into them. And so those things, I don't want to overlook that, because that stuff is actually really, really important, maybe more than people recognize. So so that's kind of what we're here to talk about, is that's what we'll refer to as recovery. Now, the second part of what I've kind of the talk that I've been asked to do is the without breaking the bank part, which I love, man. I have a bit of a passion project, I guess, with trying to debunk myths and help people figure out what's worth their investment in time and money, and what's not. Quick story on that. A lot of you will be, especially tuning into this thing, you'll be familiar with the Theragun, which is especially when it came out, it was a super expensive massage tool. And it is pretty cool if you've ever used one. But I had a friend back right when these things came out text me and say, hey, listen, I was going to get one of these for my wife. It's on sale right now for a whole $600. It was on sale for, or something. I'm going to get this for, or I'm thinking about getting this. What do you think? And so I said, oh man, listen, it's a massage tool. I'm sure it feels kind of nice, and it probably has some positive effects, but is it worth that kind of money? Probably not. Like, you can just get a Thumpers, like an old school massager. You can just get one of those, and that'll be just fine. Just do that. Don't spend the money on it. And he goes, okay, great, thanks. You just saved me some money. And then, like it must have been within days, all my patients start coming in and raving about this Theragun and telling me how awesome it is. And so I started kind of feeling worse and worse about saying to this guy, don't get it. So I hope his wife doesn't know this story. I'm not telling you who it is. But I hope he didn't tell her, because she's probably mad at me now. But the point is, you can break the bank. You can spend tons of money. There's plunge pools and hyperbaric chambers and Normatec compressive devices and massage tools and lots of things like that. And the real question that I'll try to help you with tonight is, do you need to do that? Are those things investments, or are they kind of throwing away your money? Kind of to that end, there's a physiotherapist and a CrossFitter who started this project called the mobility WOD. WOD being work out of the day. It's a CrossFit term. And so the mobility WOD is every day for a year. He went onto YouTube and put up a video about self-mobilization, or doing something to help your ankle move better, or back or shoulder, or whatever. And it was really cool. And the guy's actually world famous now, because this thing really caught on. His name's Kelly Starrett. And I've stolen a quote from him, so I'm giving him credit for it. But his quote that I really, really like is that all human beings, I hope I get this right, I'll butcher it, I'm sure. All human beings should be willing and able to perform basic maintenance on themselves. And so really, I think that's where we're going tonight. This is my way of helping you guys figure out what are these basic things that you should just be able to do yourself. I think this should be pretty fundamental. And a lot of these things were the things that we use with our national team members at the West Hub when we do these recovery sessions. So with this world of, like, honestly, you could do 100 webinars with just talk. We could do our own mobility WOD on debunking myths around recovery. We could do a video a day probably for a year, which would be super boring, but we could still do it. But I'll do my best tonight to help maybe the newbies, like the people who are kind of brand new to this whole concept of recovery, and even the grizzled vets who've tried all this stuff. I'll just try to help you figure out which of these things is maybe worth your time and your money. So my opinions, I'm going to try to keep my biases in check here, but they'll show their ugly head at certain times, and I think I'll identify when that happens, hopefully. But I would like to maybe we'll start with just talking about, like, what are the fundamentals of recovery? What are we actually trying to do? And so one of them is to help to address some of the areas that we load commonly, right, with running. So running, obviously, it's feet, it's ankles, it's shins, it's knees, hips, even low back. Those are the primary areas where we put loads through our joints and our bones and our soft tissues and muscle, tendon, ligament. And those are most often the things we're dealing with. You don't see a whole lot of runners come in through my clinic that have shoulder pain or feel like shoulder soreness is slowing down their running. It happens, but we won't talk about that too much tonight. The other kind of fundamental of recovery that we'll touch on tonight a little bit is just like generalized feelings of muscle soreness all over, or muscle fatigue, central nervous system type fatigue that we would get. And everyone knows this feeling after a big long run, and you just feel completely wiped, and maybe your mind doesn't work as quickly. Muscles are sore all over. So that's part of recovery as well, is just kind of touching on that kind of stuff, or addressing those factors. And then the third one is mental preparedness, and we circle back on this in a couple of ways through the talk tonight. But recovery there's a big component of just feeling ready, right? Like, athletes need to feel like they're prepared and like they're able to put out a pretty good effort. And probably you've all experienced this, where if you do feel prepared, you have this confidence about you, those days usually go better than the ones where you're really concerned, or maybe not doing not certain how you're going to do, right? Maybe not as confident on that day. So that's a kind of a big part of this talk tonight as well. I would encourage you. I know Rod said this at the beginning, but what I'm hoping for is nobody wants to listen to me talk for too long. So I'd like this to turn into a bit of it can even be a debate. You can argue with me if you want, because I'll probably say some things that are contrary to what you've heard or thought of, and I'm happy to discuss. So write down your questions, please, or throw them into the chat as we go. I won't keep an eye on the chat, but Rod is willing to do that. So let's get into it. Like, some of these things that people use, we'll start with a big one and a super common one, right? So for recovery, we do soft tissue treatment, mobilization. We roll on foam rollers, or we use our massage guns, excuse me, or we get the lacrosse ball or the whatever expensive ball we paid for at the store. We have the rolling stick or the scraper tools or whatever. We do soft tissue treatments. The basics of those, I think what it purports to do is, a lot of times you hear about, massaging your own tissues is a great way to kind of break down the scar tissue that you form during exercise. And while this is probably a little bit of just semantics, I can pretty comfortably tell you that that's not really what the research supports. Is we probably aren't actually breaking down tissues. Our tissues are pretty tough. I think it is fair to say, though, that we are helping to mobilize tissues. One of my analogies is always all of the layers of our tissues that we're working with are a little bit like the pages in a book. And we want all those pages in the book to move independently of each other. We'd rather not have them kind of stuck together. If you take a book and you glue all the pages and you just put it down on the floor, you got yourself a brick. And so we would rather not have our bodies kind of work like that. And so in the research, and I will try to summarize a little bit of research for everybody here, in the research with regards to foam rolling, especially, let me start with foam rolling. Sometimes they see no benefit. Sometimes they do see some benefit. So there's kind of some evidence when we look at these systematic reviews, or just reviews of studies. So there probably is some benefit here. An interesting thing that maybe we don't all know about or appreciate is that a lot of these studies will say when there's a benefit, you can get that benefit in a pretty short time period, like 90 seconds to 120. So just a couple of minutes, like maybe 2, 3 minutes of foam rolling is kind of enough. And so if we have a problem area like a calf or a hip or something, then maybe it is worth your time to do some foam rolling. We'll circle back on this again at the end and we'll talk about kind of my recommendations. But it does seem that there's some evidence supporting the idea that foam rolling might reduce muscle soreness, like delayed onset, next day type muscle soreness. And it can actually have an effect on what's called, we'll talk research terms here, but pain pressure threshold is effectively the level of pressure that your body can withstand before it turns from pressure to pain, right? And so obviously having a higher pain pressure threshold is a positive thing because it takes less pressure for you to feel really sore. Think about rolling around. If you've ever tried rolling on your IT band as you roll around on the floor there, that can be a pretty uncomfortable one, right? So foam rolling can actually decrease your pain pressure threshold, which is an interesting one. So let's test this out and see how we do with a screen share. So I do, just for those who maybe aren't totally familiar with what I'm talking about, I do have some background videos here. So this is one of our athletes just going through some basic foam rolling stuff. And I don't think it's our job tonight to kind of explain exactly what she's doing. But effectively she's kind of steamrolling around on a lot of the tissues, so lower leg, and she's kind of running through this pretty quickly. But this is what we mean when we talk about foam rolling. There's obviously lots of different techniques. But this is, if we're trying to get at all these tissues in the lower leg, and there is a little bit of research that talks about kind of the pressure from the foam roller helping to release release, I suppose is our word, some types of fluids that our bodies produce on their own, and it just helps tissues to move better. So again, just think of that, the phone book analogy or the book analogy. If we glue all the pages together, things don't work well. If we do things like this, maybe we can help those tissues move a little bit better. So what she's just done there, what she's doing now, is a bit more kind of spinal mobilization. That's one of my favorites too. A little different from what we're talking about. There you go. So that's our kind of our soft tissue foam rolling stuff. Now there's a little bit of a different set of research findings for massage guns, but I think in short with massage guns, because I don't think they're quite as common as foam rollers, there may be a short-term recovery benefit, but there may actually also be a little bit of a detrimental effect from massage guns on performance measures, so kind of strength and balance and power and these things. So maybe our take home from this is massage guns are fine, but maybe don't use it as a performance, don't use it right before the race to try to help you go faster. It's that one's not super well supported. Okay. Write down your questions. We'll come back to it at the end. So number 2, this is a big one. And so we can spend a little bit of time on this one. And again, these are the ones that kind of I hear about the most, and the ones that I think are the most common, but I'd like to hear from you too. So we'll talk at the end. Cold therapy, or kind of the cold water, the cold plunge, the cold water immersion trend that's Wim Hof has taken over the world here with getting people to especially here in Victoria, right? You can't go to an ocean without seeing people just standing in it. And so that's a big one. Now, keep in mind, like we were talking about cold for recovery, not cold as a treatment for an ankle sprain or something, right? Those are kind of two different things. For tonight, at least, those are different things. But cold used as a kind of recovery method. So this is an age-old thing. Hippocrates talked about using this for the father of medicine. This is not my area of expertise, so I won't try to say when he said these things, but this is old as the times, this talk of using cold water as therapy. So it's been in use for a long time. And kind of the methodologies have changed a little bit. And lately, it seems to be that people will fill like a plunge tub, and they'll just go kind of sit in it for a certain period of time. The research tends to talk about a pretty big range, like from anywhere from 3 to 15 minutes, or uh, 8 to 15 degrees or even higher than that. So some of these aren't even actually that cold. Like one of them, I looked at a study that had 20 degrees. It's not exactly freezing cold water, 20 degrees. So if we kind of average this thing out, and this is where it seems to land at about, 10 minutes at about 10 degrees. That's maybe that's what we're talking about when we kind of do these, when I do this summary here. And the takeaway from this one is that, yeah, absolutely, it seems to do something, right? So people will report this cold water immersion to be helpful, sometimes immediately. Now, the interesting thing with this is that it's a lot of the research talks about the subjective. So what is if the subjects of a study all jump into a cold plunge tub and then they get out? Sometimes they do physiological assessments, measure all the different markers that they might use for recovery. Other times they just say, "Hey, how do you feel?" And what seems to be a pretty strong trend is that when they ask people how they feel after they get out of a cold immersion or a cold plunge, is people will usually say, good, I'm better. I feel like I'm recovering, So the subjective is a big part of this one, and the research talks about it a lot. And I think I keep saying we're going to circle back on things, and I promise we will, but this is another one. Like, I think this is actually really, really important. This subjective feeling that you're doing something that's going to be really helpful. There is some support for physiological markers as well. So because there's a bit of support for both these things, like, yeah, it is used. Looking at one of the studies here, it was superior to other recovery methods. So this group of studies compared it to other methods. More effective than active recovery. It was more effective than contrast baths. Remember, that's kind of an old school thing now, but I'm sure lots of people still do it. It just hasn't been talked about as much, where you go cold plunge, warm bath, cold plunge, warm bath. Contrast water therapy, air cryotherapy, so just like, step in the freezer kind of thing. People seem to like the water better, and it does seem to have kind of better outcomes. Okay, so this cold plunge, I don't have any cold plunge videos, but I think you guys are all with me here. It could be just the legs, it could be from the shoulders down. So I'd say yes, that one we have seen pretty good amount of support for, and so it's an option. That one can be on the table too, and it's as simple as just running a cold tub, or if you're in a city like ours, you just wander down to the ocean and go join the hordes of people that are just standing in it. So there's cold water. Stretching. We could do a whole webinar on stretching. I really wouldn't want to. I probably would turn that down if someone came to me, because there have been so many times I feel like I've poured through the literature just looking for an answer, and there's no answer, right? You can find any sort of study that will support stretching, and you can find another one that will kind of not support it, or that will shoot it down as a useful strategy. So we can talk about a couple things. So one of the things about stretching that I think is pretty well supported, or has proven is a tough word to use if I'm talking about research, but it's been shown that it repeatedly happens, and I should backtrack a little bit. We can talk about the concepts of stretching here. So one would be static stretching. This is the old school, put your arm up behind your head and just hold, right? And then I'll stay there for 30 seconds, and then I'll do the other side, and maybe I'll stretch my hamstring the same way. So these kinds of stretching, that's a static stretch, right? That's a holding static stretch. And what does seem to be the case is that if someone static stretches, it'll decrease, or it will inhibit their muscle power immediately after. So usually the way they study this is they get someone to do a vertical jump for height. How high can you jump? And they'll measure it. And then they'll get them to static stretch, maybe their hamstrings and their quadriceps at the front of the thigh, different methods, but long holding stretches. And then they'll get them to jump again and see how high they can go. And they usually don't go as high. So again, maybe it's not, there's certainly nothing wrong with static stretching. I think many would agree that if you're going to do it, maybe afterwards is the time. And before, you might do more dynamic stretching. And dynamic stretching is moving through full ranges. with the use of your own muscle, right? So maybe you don't use a strap, or you don't throw your leg up on the wall. You just kind of use your own muscles. And this involves a little bit of a strengthening effect too. And who knows, maybe that's why. There's a lot of factors at play when we start doing static stretches, but it's kind of active movement through a restriction or through kind of the end of the range. And I actually have another video to show you here, because there's one that's kind of an interesting concept that therapists have been using maybe a bit more lately. So this is our athlete again, doing a standing active stretch of her hip. And so you'll see as she goes here, somebody yell at me if we're not seeing this. She's trying to hold her upper body steady, and she's showing off a little bit because she's got very good balance. And so you could be using an arm to hold on to something. So knee up as high as she can go, and then she'll twist her leg. So she's trying to hold her knee up and keep her ankle up and move all the way around. And so she's really challenging her left hip range of motion here. Now it's extended, her knee's behind her, and now she's back. Okay. Back down, and then I think, there you go. So now she's going to do the same movement backwards. That's knee back, that's hip extended, up like she's going over an imaginary hurdle, and then coming back forward. There we go. So that's a pretty good example of an active stretch. Now, I use that particular one quite a bit. That's a stretch that there's a whole bunch. That was the person who kind of thought those up. I've stolen from him too, which is what we do in our profession. We just take other things that we like. But to give him credit, actually, I don't know his name, but he called that a controlled articular rotation. So it's a cars, if you were Googling it. You can find those cars for any joint in the body, ankles or shoulders or whatever, wrists, I think. I like the hip one. This is a person, there you go, personal bias alert. I like the hip one. I don't use the other ones very much, but you certainly could. And I can tell you just from personal experience that I think when I do that, I feel like I've stretched my hip for a long time, when really I've only done that forward and backward stretch probably 2 or 3 times. Right. So more bang for the buck. Most people don't enjoy sitting around and stretching. If you do, by all means, do it. You go for it. But if you don't, then it's a hard sell for me to convince you that you need to spend, a half an hour a day stretching or something. So that's kind of active movement through restriction. That's an active stretch. And just a note, because I know someone's going to bring up yoga, and we can certainly talk yoga afterwards, but I think yoga fits into that. Like yoga's got a lot of, and I know depending on the time, it's got a lot of passive stretches, and then there are quite a few active movements through yoga too. And in my mind, my kind of blinders on physio brain, that's what I like about, if someone does yoga, then I like those things. And I know there's all kinds of other components of yoga, and I don't want to belittle those. But just for what we're talking about now, it's a great way of kind of passively and actively stretching. So moving through range. Okay, so those are the big ones. Now I've got a couple other ones where I'm going to show you kind of some of the things that we did in our recovery sessions. And I've got videos of these too, because they're quite hard to kind of demo. But one of them is, whenever I see a runner in the clinic, and especially when I was working with Athletics Canada, the session would start with, hey, shoes off, let's just kind of move the feet around, mobilize feet. I do tend to do a decent amount of manual therapy in my practice. So I found I was just always working on feet. So I thought, why not just teach the athletes to work on their own feet? And so if I can get my hands on this video, where we go? I lost it. Good, there we go. Okay, so this is, okay, figuring out our hand placement here. And the best part about this is there really is no wrong way to do this. What I've asked Mariah to do here is just use her top hand, that's the right hand, to hold her ankle, and use her bottom hand to move her foot around passively, okay? And there are many, many, many ways to do this. This is what your therapist might do, and they probably have an intention. They know what they're doing with the joints. You don't need to know a single thing about the foot for this to be effective. You're just kind of getting in and moving the joints passively. It actually feels, man, if you can convince someone else to do this for you at home, this is great too. But if you end up needing to do it yourself, I think it still feels pretty good. And I do think, coming back to that, what we talked about, like the feet, obviously the joints and muscles and soft tissues in the feet and the ankles do a lot of work when we run. And so just doing things like this that that help get those things moving, right? Again, pages in the book, you're just trying to help all these joints and tissues move. So this is, you know, different places. If you have a spot in your foot that feels like it needs it's stiff or it's painful, then you can get in there and kind of just try to muckle onto it with your hands and get things moving around. Oh, this is a little thing. So this is a little bit like a technique we use in the clinic, and I always used to get the athletes to try to shake their own feet, which looks really strange, but can actually do a pretty good job. So there's a self foot mobilization. Do I have research to support this? No, I didn't look for it, to be fair, but I really don't. I do have the personal belief that that's a helpful one. So if you want to call me out on that one, you can. But I do think, you know, for the time invested, and you know, everyone sits around and watches television or is in a chair at the end of the day, you can just get your feet. You get your feet moving that way, and that should help. Now, the other thing is, and the video here is I'll try to talk you through it, but it's this is the other thing is just actively moving your foot. So this is kind of, we call this foot strengthening. Okay, so she's just lifting her toe, trying to keep the other ones down, trying to lift the big toe or excuse me, hold the big toe down and lift the other four. Sorry about the angles here. It changes in a sec, I think. There we go. Lift the toes. Try to spread them apart. You'll see at the very end, she holds her hand in front of the camera. There you go. Try to spread your toes apart like the hand. So just looking to wiggle the joints around actively now instead of passively, right? So just trying to get control of those foot muscles. Now this is, I'll completely admit that this is really hard. And when I even when I sent the video to Mariah asking her to kind of make me a video just so I'm not doing this stuff while we're in mid webinar, I didn't do a very good job of some of those ones. So I'm thankful that she stepped up for me. But it's just toe movement. It's, can you spread your toes wide? Can you let them come back together? Can you lift one? Can you crunch them? Can you extend them? Can you tighten up the arch in your foot and kind of make your arch look a little bit higher? So this is strong feet. This is kind of a little bit of strength training for your feet. There is some pretty good data on this. I don't have it saved for tonight, but and we're venturing a little bit into strength training here, which we can kind of touch on towards the end. But I think that's an important one too. It's just your feet getting control, and we spend so much time on orthotics and in our favorite shoes and all these things that I think are important. And I'm not going to go anywhere near suggesting that we should all be changing our shoes into something different, but I think it's important to just make sure your feet stay strong. Lastly, I would lose my license if I didn't say this as a physio. The last thing that I've put on the list for recovery is whatever your therapist has told you to do. So if you have an exercise that's supposed to help you, cure your injury or keep you running or prevent that old injury from coming back or whatever it might be, this is where it goes, right? That's recovery. This is a perfect opportunity to do it. And maybe it's proactive recovery or maybe it's recovery from injury. So I'm stretching things a little bit here, but I just feel like it fits in pretty well. So that's just whatever you've really been kind of told to do. I think what I'm going to do, so we can talk about strength training. Strength training and learning new movement patterns was in the intro. I feel like I'll say this. The concept behind strength training is that it addresses the root cause of all of our injuries. And most of our injuries that we see in the clinic are because whatever we've done, whatever load we've put on our bodies exceeds our body's ability to handle that load, right? So let's say Achilles tendon and you try to jump rope for 24 hours straight, right? Some of the jumping tendons in your body aren't going to be able to handle that load. They're going to get injured, okay? The theory here is that strength training can improve the capacity of those tissues to do this exercise. And so that's kind of the theory, and it's quite well accepted that a good strength training program that doesn't have to be too involved or too heavy even, but a good strength training program should help you improve your efficiency. It's not exactly a recovery technique, although you could argue that if you have more strength and more capacity, then you'll recover faster, right? That 10K run won't take it all completely out of you. You'll have it in you to do another one the next day. So So that's my just a little bit of a take on strength training. And so the short answer is yeah, I think it's worth it, but to really get into that, I think is not for tonight. So this is the frustrating part here. This is where you say, okay, if we look back on everything I've said, I kind of said, yeah, there's some support for this, and then there's some other people that say it's not very beneficial. So with that said, and all these kind of pros and cons around all these recovery techniques, is any of this stuff worth it? Is it worth doing, or should you just go run and then rest, right? Is it worth doing? And so my answer to you is yes. And here's why. It's in research, it's very, very difficult to kind of physio rehab research, at least. It's difficult to prove that something really works, right? There are so many factors. It's a tough one. But all of the things we talked about tonight, all of the things, there's some support for in the research, which is, I mean, that counts for something. There's no unequivocal proof for any of them, but there's some support. And truth be told, a lot of the things that we do in our practice, even manual therapy generally, like putting our hands on people and, you know, cracking things and mobilizing joints and massage and all these things, there's not overwhelming evidence in favor of that. But I think a lot of people and a lot of practitioners still find that useful. And so we do it, and we do it with a little dose of kind of evidence for the other things that we do. And we kind of just put all these things together to make a bit of a package that helps people get better. And so I think that's one point, I think. Now, I'm stealing a quote from one of these reviews that I really liked, and that's, they talk about end user belief. And this is cold water immersion, I think, where remember I said that a lot of times it was just that people believed they were doing the right thing. Subjectively, cold water really feels good and like something that's helping. So end user belief is incredibly important. If you believe that the thing you're doing makes you better, then it probably does. Like, there's a whole lot of this involved here that's, you know, we could have brought somebody else on who's more qualified to talk about psychology, but there's a lot of that, I think, at play here. And so end user belief, if you feel prepared, then you're better prepared for sure. And then lastly, like, most of these techniques are safe. The whole point of this conversation tonight is that they're low cost, right? So they won't break the bank to do them. None of them really, for the most part, will detract from training effects, aside from these little kind of minimal things that we talked about. So you know, those are my three yes votes for these recovery techniques. So maybe just to summarize, and I'm looking at time here, and I think we're probably in a good spot, as long as people are going to grill me afterwards, I think we'll be good here. So my recommendations, because I know everyone would be disappointed, I think, if they just listen to me say, well, this is maybe good and maybe not, and see you later. So recommendations, if it's me or if it's an athlete I'm coaching or a patient of mine at the clinic, I think you trial a few techniques. You don't necessarily have to do all of them, but you try a few. And if you're choosing a few, maybe you choose the ones that are more relevant to you. If you've sprained your ankle in the past and you have some stiffness there, then maybe you work on the ankle mobility, right? If you know that you have, you know, foot weakness, or you think your arch is a problem, or you often have foot issues like in your foot, plantar fascia pain or forefoot pain, maybe you do some of this foot strengthening stuff. Okay. So we can do some of them. You don't have to do all. In order of the way we talked about them: foam rolling, massage gun, soft tissue techniques. Sure. But you don't need to do too much. I cringe. I hear people come back all the time and say, hey, I did 40 minutes of foam rolling last night. And again, that's great. If you feel like that's going to be helpful for you, then you do that. But I think what the research supports is, you know, 2-3 minutes. So maybe on each trouble spot, maybe 2 or 3 minutes on 2 minutes on your calves and 2 on your hips, and then you're gone. You're moving on to something else. Short doses. Cold water immersion. Maybe you do, and again, research is all over the place. Maybe you do 10 minutes at about 10 degrees, 10 minutes at cold water, right? Or cold water temperatures. And you just kind of hang out and you do one, right? And you probably don't need to do that more than once, twice a week. You can do more, but if you're looking for the effect, I think you'd probably get it with a bit of a less frequent trip to the ocean. Self-mobilization of your feet, just kind of wiggling your joints around. You can do that every day, probably, or just whenever you get a chance. Active movements, those hip, kind of around that hip hurdle exercise, the foot strength kind of stuff. You could do that every day. You could do it every other day. You could do it every third day. You'd probably get some benefit from doing that, a couple times a week. I like it as a warm up. I think you run for a few minutes, then you do some of that stuff. At least the big ones like the hip stuff. And then you move on. Um, Physio exercise or therapy exercise as prescribed to you. And then, maybe you consider adding a strength training program, which is, again, it's a big one, but that could be a part of what helps the recovery. So I think, listen, in summary, bottom line is if you found something that seems to work for you and you like that thing and there's nothing illegal about that thing, then I think, if I'll check all those boxes, I think you go for it. Those recovery is part of it, at least, is about mental preparedness and just feeling like you're doing your due diligence. And so I think if you're on track with some things that you like, then you stick with those. Maybe you could try some of the new ones. If you've done nothing, maybe you work in a couple of these things. But I hope there's been some kind of somewhat interesting or informative things in there for you. You can tell me if there wasn't, that's fine too. But I'll open it up. It's I see a whole bunch of things in the chat and the Q&A. So I'll let Rod choose the interesting ones here, and we'll open it up.
Okay. Yeah, first of all, we got there's three here we can kind of bundle into one answer. About the cold water. By the way, we've been watching the tour, little tour synopsises every night, and every night they're showing bike riders in tubs of ice and tubs of cold water. So it's interesting you brought that one up. So they're certainly using it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so would a cold shower post-workout have similar effects to a cold plunge? And the other two are dealing with how soon after their workout should they be doing the cold plunge?
Yeah, well, so that's a good question. The shower one first. I think similar, but I don't think if we're choosing kind of A or B for maximal effects. Now, this one I will fully admit I could be wrong on, but my understanding is that the cold plunge, say, if we're talking about same water temperature, you're underwater for 10 minutes or you're showering for 10 minutes. My understanding is that the cold plunge will have more of an effect, but again, subjective, right? So it's pretty hard to be in a cold shower for 10 minutes, right? And so I think the effect would be quite strong from that too. So if you have access to a shower, most of us probably do, you don't have access to a cold tub, or you just you're not into maybe wasting so much water you fill your tub, then I think you can probably go either. How soon after? So Roger, right. And I think a lot of the reason for the tour guys jumping into the cold plunge tubs, and actually I forgot about cooling vests now that we're talking about the tour, but many of us don't have access to those. I think they do it right away uh, for the cool down. It's been really hot in France for the Tour de France. I think they're up towards 30 just about every day. And those guys, we're watching it in the comfort of like it's 9 a.m. here and it's, just getting warm out, but they're at like 4 p.m., right? Peak heat on the day. So I think they're using it for two reasons. One is probably recovery, but two is just to cool the body down a little bit, which is of course part of recovery. To answer that question, it can be done as a recovery method, hours after you've done your exercise. It could also be, it could be relatively soon after. I think you might need to be a little bit careful, especially if you're jumping into an ocean or something. A drastic change. This is safety trouble. I'm thinking of my lawyer right now. But drastic change from really high core temperature to really cold, I think can wreak havoc sometimes on your nervous system. So let's not suggest that people go doing that unless you're maybe in your tub or something. But it can be done much later.
Okay. Same thing with the foam roller, when to do it, right after running or later.
You know what? I actually like, maybe personal bias, maybe some research to support. I like it before.
Yeah.
Because I think there is an effect of mobilizing tissue, and if we're going on that, then I think it makes sense to just do it beforehand. I wouldn't often personally do it before running, but for sure every time I walk into a gym to do any sort of strength training workout, that's the first thing. So I like it before, but it fits anytime. It's like there's foam rollers my wife runs, and I won't even say I try to keep up with her because I can't, but I'm active enough, and we just have foam rollers kind of kicking around, and the TV room, they're sitting there. There's some in the by the couch, and they're everywhere in our house.
I think that's a big deal
Already
too.
fit
If
into
you've got
stone.
it close, you're going to use it. If you have to go find it somewhere, you're not going to. So we got our foam
Exactly.
roller in the living room
We have a
too.
little one of those IKEA baskets of just rehab tools. There's a band and a ball and
Yeah.
a massage guns in there. My wife bought one. But yeah, it's all in that one little bit, and you use it more for sure if it's right there.
Okay. Is there any value in toe spacers?
Oh,
There's
I
a good
like
one
this
for
one.
you. Yeah.
So toe spacers, maybe a bit more of a corrective one.
Yeah.
For recovery, probably not. I don't know. Well, maybe there is. I don't know. It does tend to be more of a recovery thing. Now, I am a fan of ultras and topos and Vivo barefoots and kind of shoes that actually allow your feet to do this. And I'm a bit of a fraud, I guess, because I also own shoes that make my toes do this. And I run in Pegasus, and I run in normal shoes because they just fit me better, it feels like. But I do like the concept of being able to spread your toes apart. I would rather see you just learn how to do it as opposed to use the spacers. But especially if you have something I've experimented with them actually recently, dealing with some forefoot pain. I thought I'd see if it made a difference. And in my case, it didn't. But yeah, I like toe spacers. And hopefully most running stores have them. They're pretty cheap. There's a brand called Correctos that are obscenely expensive, but I think they're pretty good. So,
Okay.
yeah, not recovery, but yeah, I like the idea.
Okay. Just I'm going to plug something here. If there's the odd question going into the chat box, and it should be going into the Q&A box, so we might not see you. So put them under the
Okay.
Q&A. All right. Is ART effective? A-R-T.
Oh yeah. So active release therapy is a technique which involves the therapist. So this is something that somebody, qualified as a therapist will do to you. And they'll kind of usually they got really strong thumbs, and they'll use their really strong thumb and pin down muscle tissue while you actively stretch it. Is it oh, this opens a can of worms. Is any manual therapy effective? Lots of people like it, and it is very, very well known, and people live and die by it. So yeah, I'll say it's possibly an effective thing. It's also like most manual therapy techniques where it's not a cure-all, and it doesn't fix Achilles tendinopathies, and it doesn't fix soft tissue tears and that kind of thing. But for sure it can be a helpful thing. It actually certainly it comes back to that pain pressure threshold that we talked about. ART is often very uncomfortable. The people who deliver it usually like to kind of dig in there. And so ART, active release therapy, can probably help you improve your pain pressure threshold and therefore make your pain feel better. So
Okay. How about saunas?
yeah, you know what? I almost mentioned infrared saunas, but I realized I don't have a ton of I didn't think a ton of people had access to them. So there's infrared, and then there's kind of regular saunas. Regular saunas more people are familiar with. It's just heat therapy. Um and it's funny because cold therapy has really taken off and left the heat therapy in the dust. Uh, I think I think it fits into that end user belief. It can be useful. It will have some sort of effect on sweating, so kind of circulation, and probably blood pressure and some cardiovascular benefit potentially, just in terms of getting blood moving through the body. Um, so I will not sit here, and there are very few things I think that I would sit here and say, no, don't do that. If you want me to say everyone needs to do, and I know you're not doing this, but just to play devil's advocate, I wouldn't say, hey, everyone go use the sauna because it's the thing, right? I wouldn't do that either. This is back to, if you've done this and it works for you, then fantastic. Go for it.
And this next one's kind of a long question, but we'll have a go. I have an ongoing tendonitis in my knee that I've been dealing with, using several hamstring and glute exercises that help, but always find that IMS in those areas provides the relief I need. Would soft massage or foam rolling be helpful, or would you recommend another way of getting into these spots?
Yeah, and it depends on the kind of the true diagnosis. Lots of times, tendonitis or tendinopathy, I can't remember what they said, is is it
Tendonitis, yeah.
tendonitis? Yeah, so maybe that's a term that means something slightly different to me compared to someone else. Or there are some of these things useful? Usually, bit of a ballpark statement. If we have a true tendon injury, we don't see a ton of benefit from kind of stretching those tissues. You could very well see a little bit of benefit from soft tissue work, so foam rolling and some of those kind of self massage techniques that we talked about. You could. It's a bit tough to say without like a true look at things in a diagnosis. Usually, if we have a kind of a classic tendon overuse injury, there needs to be something in the rehab program that involves load, right? So exercise that directly focuses on that tissue.
Okay.
So that's kind of a rehabby question, a little bit more than a recovery one too. But yeah, that's one where I'll just kind of pivot around, and I'm trying to talk myself out of a job, but I think that one needs someone to have a look at it. So
Okay. Would you consider regular visits to an RMT recovery or more treatment?
oh, so I feel like someone's trying to get me in trouble on that one.
Yeah, no kidding.
I think, oh man, how do I talk my way through this one? It's both. It's both. Because like, there are very few, like I said about being a strength coach, like everybody's either injured or almost injured or previously injured. Or so even if you're going to massage for just recovery and relaxation, they'll probably find something, right? They've got these kind of tentacle hands. They can get in there and figure out where all the sore spots are. And so they'll make it both, I think. Now you could, if I was an RMT, I'd probably say that you could make it either, right? Like you could make, depending on the technique used, you can make it more recovery based, kind of effleurage or flushing or circulatory versus, therapeutic. So it could be both. Depends what they do. How about that? Depends.
That sounds good. And one here about you recommended foot strengthening exercises for plantar fascia. So I guess she wants a little more specifics on that for plantar fasciitis.
Yeah, yeah. Usually for plantar fascia, I'm gonna have to do this with my hand. So I've done this a few times, right? So the toe stuff is useful. Getting control of your feet. Like you often will look down to people and everyone with their hand can do this, but a lot of people with their toes cannot, right? It's quite difficult. So just kind of getting control of your foot. The other one that I like a lot for like a plantar fascia pain, and again, this kind of is a tough one to do over a webinar, but it may be that kind of foot flat on the ground and just trying to kind of tighten up the arch, right? And the way that I teach people how to do this in the clinic is I don't want to see this. I don't want to see fingers curl. I don't want to see toes crunch. It's not so much that. I don't love that exercise. I would rather see this, which is the muscles inside, in this case, my hand, but the foot is kind of works the same. So kind of tightening up the foot. And what that looks like when your foot's flat on the ground is it kind of lifts up. And so your arch lifts and your foot shortens, like your toes draw in towards your heel. That's a tough one to describe over the
No, that's good. That's
the
good.
short arch exercise is generally what that's called. There may be some YouTube videos on it. So that might be a part of what helps your plantar fascia pain get better.
Okay. Does a rest day need to be a complete rest day, or can it be a cross training day when you're engaging different muscles?
Yeah, see, you know what I've noticed? You talked to a lawyer, and the lawyers will always joke that, hey, we always just say it depends. It's always the lawyer answer. And physios will always say that's the physio answer. It kind of does depend where you are in your training kind of regime in the program, right? If you've just loaded up your marathon training and you've just done a massive week, then you probably just need a full day right off. And maybe you go for a little walk or, float in a tube on the lake or something. Like you can move. I wouldn't probably hop on the elliptical trainer and do, even, 30 on the elliptical. Tour de France guys, speaking of them, they'll always ride their bikes on a rest day, but I mean, they're different from most of us, and bikes are so much more easy on the body than running is. So when feeling at all fatigued and tired, active rest is good. And by active rest, we usually just mean, go for a walk or do something really easy, quick. Maybe you go for a swim because that helps your body move, but leaves your legs alone. So if you're training really hard, it's probably off. if you're kind of early in the training phase, it could maybe be something else.
Okay. And one quick comment here too. There's a bunch of funny ones in the chat line about how many people are stretching their feet while they're listening to you, and just about everybody is. So now it's
I am
really,
too.
I am too. So
This whole time, yeah.
you started something. Okay, the last one here. Where did it go? What's the best way of starting a recovery routine? I'm not quite sure if they mean like right after their workout or just getting into the whole idea of a recovery routine, but
Yep. I'm not sure either, so I'll answer both.
yeah.
I think you can, if we're talking about starting from, hey, I don't do anything right now, I just run and then I don't run. So for recovery, pick one thing, right? If you have no foam roller, then tomorrow just do some foot mobilizations. Okay. And then again, think about this kind of list that we ran through. Foam rolling, right? So if you have a foam roller, then maybe the next day you do two of those things, and maybe you do some cold water immersion. And so you can just pick one thing at a time. This is by no means is this a package deal, right? This is just kind of I touched on the most common things. So so you can do that. If the person means, how do I sit down tomorrow and what do I do in my routine, which may be more the question now that I say it out loud. The cold water immersion thing probably isn't part of the package deal, but you could sit down and like the videos that I showed you, Mariah could have done all those things in 5 to 10 minutes, right? She did a bit of foam rolling. You twist around, you sit on the roller, you wiggle your feet around, then you put your foot on the ground and you do your foot range of motion stuff. And then once your foot's wiggled around and moving well, then maybe you stand up and do that standing hip movement exercise. And you go through, each of these things a couple times. It really doesn't need to take very long, right? Our sessions with athletics used to be an hour long. You could do 10, 15 minutes.
Okay.
So yeah, you can start tomorrow with, as much or as little as you like. For the love of anything, don't make it more than an hour. You don't need that much, but
All right. Well, that was great. And I think you got everybody out there stretching their feet. So hopefully they'll keep that up at least,
better.
So
Better.
yeah.
Marathon time.
Yeah, no kidding. And speaking of marathon, we kind of had some exciting news. We actually sold out all the entries for the marathon, and we've got quite a long wait list as well. So that's pretty cool. There are still spaces in the half, and there's also that's filling up pretty quick too. So it's an exciting year for the marathon this year for sure. So thanks again, Trevor. That was great. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me. It's always fun to do, and
oh yeah.
Let me jump up on my soapbox, and sometimes I talk too much, but
for sure. No, not at all. Not at all. So now we get to the fun part of giving away. We got 3 sets of sunglasses to give away, and you can put these in the chat box. So it's going to be like the first one that answers each question right. It's going to get a set of glasses, and I guess Tammy's going to keep an eye on who answers them first. Yeah, Tammy's running the whole thing, by the way. Thanks, Tammy. She's the marathon sign in the corner there. And when you do win a pair, just put your email in the chat box for Tammy and she'll get a hold of you. So the first one, these are all fairly simple. Is Trevor Millar a chiropractor, a physiotherapist, or a massage therapist?
Oh,
that's my favorite.
That was quick. Holy cow.
You let them up. They're on it out there.
They're say who's Trevor Millar?
No, I wouldn't say that, no.
The very first person was Emily McDonald.
Okay, so Emily, if you want to put your email in the chat box there. And this is kind of almost a giveaway. Trevor is the co-founder of what physiotherapy?
They were answering before they'd even started that. That was Naomi Tito.
I knew it was going to happen there. And the final one's a little bit more difficult, but probably not if you've been paying attention. What is the anniversary year for Royal Victoria Marathon in 2025?
Oh, nope.
Nope. Wow.
Nope. 2025.
Nope.
Not quite. A little less than 50.
Wow. Okay, more promotion required on our part.
Oh, I saw one. I saw
one.
Where'd it go?
Where'd it go? I saw it. Sylvia? No.
No, I think it was
It's Kara.
Caitlin?
SL. No, it's Sylvia.
Oh.
Sharon Lowe. There we go. No, there's another one before that. Oh my God. Suddenly they got it right all at once.
Bill McIntyre?
Gary Evans. There we go. No?
No.
Jeez.
Oh my goodness.
Okay.
What's
I'm
the
gonna let
answer?
you- I'm gonna let-
45th is the correct answer next
Yeah,
week.
we should
And
tell them
and-
that. Phil-
And
How
so
about
Phil McIntyre.
Phil McIntyre? Yeah. Okay, Phil, you got it. All right, folks, and don't forget, this will all be posted online on the Royal Victoria Marathon website, so you can watch Trevor all over again and catch some of those little video flicks for various exercises. And of course, we will be having another series next month, so you'll all find out about that pretty quick. And thanks to everybody for joining in tonight, and hope you enjoyed it. I did. Don't forget, stretch your feet.
Get moving.
Get moving.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much,
everyone.
Trevor.
Thanks, Trevor.
And get
Thanks,
registered
everyone.
if you're not registered, everyone.